Welcome back to the Tour Breakaway. That's a wrap on the Tour de France. It is the day after the Tour de France. Always a sad day, but at least I get to talk about the Tour de France, which is what we like to do in this period of the year where we recognize that we don't just have Grand Tour cycling all 365 days. Actually a good thing because I tried recording last night, late at night, and when I finished, it said recording error. So we get to do it again today. Today, winners and losers. 23 teams in this year's Tour de France, some of them overachieving, some of them achieving against all odds, and some of them having an absolutely abysmal time. Wouldn't want to be on that team bus most of the days, nor going home completely empty-handed, as we saw with a bunch. So we'll talk about that. And in due course, that'll, of course, address some of the riders. Before I go into it, just a big thank you to everybody for sticking around, staying tuned during the Tour de France. Really fun. It's really the most fun 3 weeks of cycling of the year. Every day a new adventure. Every year's tour is different and fun and has its own twists and turns. This year was no exception. So thank you for coming along for the journey. If you're new here, if you're watching this, you're not subscribed, give us a subscribe. We're going to be covering just about everything. We're going to have the Olympics. We're going to have the Vuelta. We're going to have the World Championships. And we've even got a couple classics. So let's start. We always like to end on a good note. So let's start with the losers. All right. I'm going to start Israel Startup Nation. Chris Froome, Dan Martin, Michael Woods. And sitting here last year, we're like, could Froome lead this team? And we realized no. But could Dan Martin, coming off his assault to the podium in the Vuelta last year and feeling, according to him, better than ever? And then, of course, Mike Woods, transfer of the season. He's having a career year, in my opinion, or career 2 years. And he was in the finale at Liège-Bastogne-Liège, Flèche Wallonne, took an epic stage in Romandy, won the mountains in Tour de Suisse in the lead-up, and he would represent this team as a GC hopeful. And so you got to figure between him and Dan Martin, at least, something's good is going to happen. But in the end, Dan Martin said the highlight of his race was getting fifth on stage 18. That's the Luz Ardennes stage. And so it's a little tough to hear that from a guy who was fourth at the Vuelta and has won stages of the Vuelta and the Tour de France before. And Woods, unfortunately, fell right out of GC. His best finish, he had a third on stage 8 and was able to wear polka dots for just one single day. But all in all, the Israel team, who have done nothing but show momentum since landing on the World Tour scene last year with wins in their Grand Tours, really fell short here this year. Next, Trek. And okay, Bauke Mollema won a stage. He won stage 14. Great win. He's a great rider. But this team was really nowhere to be found the entire tour. Nibali did nothing. Former world champion Mads Pedersen won top 10. He won Kuurne Brussels Kuurne this year. And what about Jasper Stuyven? Okay, he got second on stage 7, but he was over a minute back. Never had a shot to win on the day. And look, this guy won Milan-San Remo. And so I really hoped for more from this team, in particularly Mads and Jasper. And from a GC perspective, what happened to Ciccone? Like, where is he on this tour? And what is the future of this Trek team? I'm just left with a lot of question marks coming out of this year's tour. Now, it's about to get even uglier. Movistar. Ouch. I mean, we had some bad luck with Marc Soler out on stage 2 after that nasty crash on stage 1, cracking his elbows. Not great luck. But you've got a lot of firepower, and coming into this, you had to feel like this team was going to have everything lined up for another team title victory, and even potentially so much strength that they have some drama. But there was nothing to be found. Miguel Angel Lopez, nothing, and eventually dropped out on stage 18. Valverde, who's been riding like he's 20, out there, who won a stage of the Dauphiné. He did get it out front one day, took second on stage 15, cool, but he was nowhere close on GC. And so when we look at the GC, where they're usually placing a couple riders, Enric Mas, 6th overall. And you can say, okay, well, last year he was 5th, so, it's about on par. No. With his experience, he should have been better this year. And Movistar should not have let him lose a place to Ben O'Connor. Joke is on everyone in the top 10 behind O'Connor for letting him get 8 minutes on that day. And worst of all, as it relates to the team award, the thing that they're going for, the reason for their existence, they were 9th. So it's an ouch. Now, can it get worse than Movistar? I think potentially yes, with Groupama FDJ. So we had a new look for the team. We got transition of power from Thibaut Pinot to David Gaudu on GC. And taking fast man Arnaud Demar, who crushed it in the Giro last year, won 4 sprints. Maglia Ciclamina just absolutely cleaned up, looking unstoppable. And they took ITT world medalist Swiss man Stefan Kung. So what did we get from this crew? Demar, 4th on stage 6, his best result, and then missed the time cut on stage 9 in teens. See you later. There ain't no green in those hills. And really poor result. And I'm being a bit harsh, but this guy was one of the favorites to win the green jersey. He was my pick to win the green jersey at the start of the season. And you got to think, okay, well, no problem, because Gaudu's going to hold it down. He's going to represent. He's going to get in the top 10. Look, this guy won 2 stages of the Vuelta last year, but never better than 9th in the GC and finished 11th overall. And he had a day out attacking on Bastille Day, which probably cost him in the end a top 10 finish. But outside the top 10 for David Gaudu. And then Stefan Kung for the 3rd discipline with the time trials. And he was good, but not good enough. 2nd and 4th in the TTs. It isn't bad when you look at what that is. But overall for Groupama, they bring a great sprinter, a guy who's got a good shot at the GC, top 10 overall, and a great time trialist. And you leave there with no wins, no top 10 in the GC. Not good. Now, another one. Team DSM, formerly Sunwebs, the darling of the 2020 Tour de France, taking home 3 wins, the Combativity Prize, and winning the Hearts of the World. This year, couldn't be more opposite. Soren Krauw Andersen, who won 2 stages last year, achieved nothing before he left before the start of stage 14. Then, Case Bowl, the sprinter they choose to back, never better than 6th. And Casper Peterson, with a shot on stage 19, but couldn't be cohesive in that mumble jumble of a breakaway to contest the win. Couldn't do it. Ended up finishing 3rd, but way back of Mohoric without a shot at really delivering a win. Then Astana. And this one's interesting. I'm curious for folks' feedback on this, because you could say this tour is a win for them, with Luchenko finishing 7th, the first time he's contested GC in a Grand Tour. But as far as I'm concerned, it was a really silent 7th. Overall, they're on my loser list because you just didn't really see them. And the best stage finish that you had for Lutsenko was 8th. He never attacked. And it's a great job by him overall. Look, he's notoriously inconsistent. Never seen him compete for a GC, like I said. So it's a good result. But we just never saw him. And we never saw Jakob Fuglsang, who still got it. And he was 3rd of the Tour de Suisse. He was nowhere and then didn't start on the final day of the tour. And that doesn't look good. And he said he had some bad reactions to a COVID shot, but he finished okay on the time trial the day before, 48th. So not sure what's going on there. And then Aramburu, great talent, quietly thereabouts, 3 top 10s, but never really animated for a win. Fraile, a top 10 in a break on stage 14. Izagirre was probably the closest to delivering something with a 2nd and a 4th. But I don't know. For me, I just didn't feel like I saw what Astana could really deliver. And like you look at that and you're like, okay, you got a guy in the top 10, you had a top 3 stage finish. It's not bad. But for me, I just expected more of this Astana team. I expected them to contend for wins, not just be near the front, but contend for stage wins en route to this result. Other losers, the lady with the sign, no doubter. Not since Darth Vader has there been a greater villain recognized across the entire galaxy. So lesson learned, please stand back, folks, and respect the riders. And then the last loser of the tour, COVID. Piss off COVID, you lose. We got 2 Tour de France's through while you were ravaging the globe, and you weren't able to screw it up. And we're delighted for that. And so please stay away from us. We hear you're trying to come back, but please don't do that. Stay away. Okay, moving on. Now, the winners. First off, Jumbo-Visma. Look at this team. Last year, 2nd place, taking a stage in the process by Primoz Roglic. Wout got his 2 along the way as well. And so you come into this year's tour, and you're looking for about the same. Your leader goes down early, replaced with a youngster who's been a domestique but never a leader in a Grand Tour. And you take 2nd anyway. And then Wout goes and makes history of his own, winning 3 stages, one of each discipline on historical stages. The Ventoux double stage, the Champs-Élysées. Not since 30 years ago. No, more than that. I think they said 79. Hinault was the first time that you saw somebody win across 3 disciplines at the Tour de France. And on top of that, you get a stage win for Sepp Kuss. Everyone loves Sepp Kuss. Look at what they had at the end of the first week. Nothing. No wins, leader abandoning, and Wout wasn't yet in form. And look where they went from there. They only finished with 4 guys. And the 4 that went home didn't go in a pretty way. Tony Martin was beaten to heck, the poor guy. But the 4 that made it out all did something meaningful. Even Teunissen. Great to see him back, and his efforts to lead out Wout yesterday was impeccable. They made an Arnold Palmer out of lemons that they were handed. Now the next team, Bahrain victorious. This team had darlings of the Tour de France written all over them, following what was a really upsetting loss of Mikel Landa earlier in the Giro. You heard me rant about how mad I was that he did in the first place, but they lost him, and they had a great Giro. They had a great lead up to the Tour de France, and they had everything set up to be the darlings of this race. Padun winning the 2 hardest stages of the Dauphiné, Gino Mader avenging his defeat at the hands of Primož Roglic early in the season at Paris-Nice. And look, they left him at home. Both of them. They're like, what are you doing? Why would you ever do that? These are the most. You guys have 2 young, exciting riders. Why would you not send them? And before we go into what they achieved, I looked back at their Tour de France last year at Bahrain, and you know how many wins they had? 0. You know how many stage top 3s they had? 0. 0 top 3s on any stage in the Tour de France last year, and delivered Mikel Landa to 4th overall. What a boring team that was. But they animated this race. Matty Moric, who literally did a headstand on the road in the Giro, wins 2 stages, 2 combativity awards, and wore polka dots for a day. Look at his teammate. Poles, 4 days in polka dots, a combativity award. Sonia Cabrelli, a 2nd and a 3rd. 3rd in the points jersey as well. Not that that's anything to get excited about, but it showed that he was thereabouts on all the intermediate sprints fighting. 3rd in teens. Filthy. Dylan Toynes wins the stage as well. It makes it 3 for the team. And by the way, they lost their GC guy, Jack Haig, and Pela Bilbao finished in the top 10 anyway. So I got a song. It's Bahrain wins. Hallelujah. It's Bahrain wins. Now, let's hope the police raid doesn't result in them finding anything. And that's the end of that. Oh, and by the way, they won the team title, but nobody cares about that except Movistar. So we'll move on from that. But good wins, there and thereabouts, and always raced to win. When I talked about the losers, it's like, okay, maybe they weren't really the losers if you look at them on paper results alone, but these guys were out to win, and you love that. Absolutely love to see it. Now, our next winner. I'm jumping around a bit. The UCI. Huh? The UCI? How could you say the UCI is a winner? And if you had to say huh for a second, it's because you haven't had to worry about the UCI too much during this Tour de France. Last year, I had to do an entire podcast just to clown the UCI. The ridiculous fines. Remember they pulled Alaphilippe out of yellow for the improper feed that impacted nobody. There was a laundry list. And we didn't have that this year. We moved on from the super tuck, littering, etc., and by and large got through a Tour de France without having to curse the UCI's name in vain. Love that. Also winners. The super favorites. The Wout van Aert, Mathieu van der Poel, and Julian Alaphilippe trio. Let's not forget, 2021 is the year of the super favorites. These guys, the Galacticos, the future of cycling, and they delivered over the course of this year's tour. Now, it was too busy for all 3 in the first week. That one went to Alaphilippe and Mathieu van der Poel. They were the only 2 people to share yellow in the first week. They did it along with 2 stage wins and then moved over to let Wout enter, who won 3 stages in the second half of the race. And between these 3 guys, they won 5 stages across all 3 disciplines. They held 3 different jerseys of distinction for a combined 11 days. Good on you, boys. Now, can't mention Mathieu van der Poel without talking about Alpecin Phoenix. Mathieu van der Poel will win 6 days in yellow, 1 day in polka dots, all the greatness with his grandfather's honor and the retro jerseys that they did, all the positive press. Merlier gets a win, and Jasper Philipsen, 6 top 3s. 3 seconds as well. That's an ouch to not pull off a win. Amazing campaign for these guys for the first time at the Tour de France. And then I'll say our last winner might be the biggest winner, Deceuninck Quickstep. Look, it's a team we're used to seeing win. Alaphilippe gets us warmed up with a win, puts him in the yellow jersey, also held green for the first 3 days before handing it over to his teammate Mark Cavendish, who wore it for the rest of the tour. They held the green jersey every day of the Tour de France. Cavendish, the story of the tour, story of the year. 4 stage wins, equaling the Merckx record. This guy never thought he'd ride in the Tour de France again. And look, last year, Sam Bennett, he took 2 stages. Cav got 4. The team held green and yellow and won 5 stages. Absolutely incredible. And you get to do it with this sense of brotherhood. This is the Wolf Pack. Look how Michael Morkov tapped his brakes on the finish line to make sure that Cavendish finished in front of him and got the win on his search for record. Those are teammates. That's a tight crew. This is a great win. Deceuninck Quickstep, after all the drama in the lead-in, absolute winners of the Tour de France. Now, I told you there's going to be a lot of non-mentions. Ineos. Well, now here I go. Look, I'm mentioning the non-mentions, but whatever. And I'll tell you why I'm not going to mention Ineos. Because, look, there's lots of talk about these guys having 4 leaders. That's not really the case. It never was the case. But when you break it down, all Ineos was expected to do was get 3rd place. Look, how they got there was a lot harder and a lot more work than it looked like it needed to be. But at the end of the day, they did their job. Bora lost Sagan, but got 2 stage wins. That's a fine result. Cofidis, they didn't win anything, but we talked about them a lot because Cofidis is vampires, and that was probably the meme of the Tour de France. So Cofidis gave us reason to pay attention to them for once. And then Lotto. Look, a team, they got Stugats, but Brent Van Moor and the team were out there to represent their fallen comrade in Caleb Ewan and got a lot of TV time. So neither a winner nor a loser. They're in the non-mentioned category. So look, that's what I think. And I'm really curious to know what you think about the winners and losers, because it's not as simple as the results on paper. It's actually a lot about their approach to the race. And I do also think it's probably part of, interpretation of these performances is in part to the coverage. And, I watched most of it on NBCSN here in the U.S. Really interested to hear how folks who were following on Eurosport or other coverage interpreted it. So particularly if you didn't watch NBCSN coverage, I want to know what you think of my interpretation. And then if you watched NBCSN, what you thought of my interpretation as well. Was yours similar? So actually tell me how you watched it and if you saw it the same way. And look, we got a lot to be excited about. We got the Olympics coming up, the Vuelta. We've got Paris-Roubaix. We've got a lot more cycling. So come along for the journey. Once again, give a subscribe if you're not already. I found almost 90% of those watching these videos are not subscribed. So go ahead and take a second to do that now and appreciate all the fun of the Tour de France. This is a wrap. And until next time, thank you very much for listening to the Tour Breakaway.